to the Filmosophers show. I'm Chris Bush.
And I'm Dean Slider.
And the Filmosophers is a show where we have philosophical discussions with people who make the movies, the people who love them. We are thrilled to have on the show today actor, director, producer, author, Joe Manganiello. Joe, thanks for joining us. Real treat.
Thanks a lot for having me. Thanks a ton.
Yeah. Thank you. We had the pleasure of meeting 5 or 6 years ago, I think, at the Sirius Studios, where David Lynch was recording a show in an adjacent studio, and you dropped in to say hello.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I've been a huge fan of David's, going all the way back to my kind of seeing Elephant Man on TV way before I probably should have seen it. I was very young, and that movie broke my heart as a kid, and I realized how effective and emotional and visceral his filmmaking was, and all the way through Wild at Heart, Blue Velvet, Lost Highway. I remember waiting to get advanced screening tickets to go see Lost Highway in Pittsburgh, where I grew up, and being one of the first people who got to see that. And I was just such a huge fan. But more importantly, I wanted to talk to him about TM, because at the time I'd been a practitioner of Vedic meditation for many years. And David enthusiastically invited me to come and learn TM rather than the Vedic from the teacher that I had learned at the school in Los Angeles. And also invited me to bring my then girlfriend, who became my wife, Sophia, to learn as well. So thank you very much for facilitating all of that.
Yeah, beautiful. I'd like to talk for a moment about your experience in front of the camera and then behind the camera. You got out of the gate pretty quick with a part in the first Spider-Man Sam Raimi film. And was it pretty much smooth sailing from there, or did you have to slug it out for a while before you landed the True Blood role?
There was a slugfest in between Spider-Man and True Blood. There were, I came out of the gate from Carnegie Mellon School of Drama very quickly. It was like being shot out of a cannon, and yes, got snatched up into Sam Raimi's Spider-Man very quickly. And and then went through kind of a series of life challenges that I needed to get over, and there were some demons that I needed to slay once and for all. And it was actually during that period that I picked up meditation for the first time, and that became a part of my daily regimen. And I actually walked away from acting for a while. I'd seen a side of the business that I wasn't sure that, it was just very overwhelming, and there was a lot to digest very quickly. And without getting into too many details, it was True Blood was really what I'd kind of, banged around town as a journeyman before finding a home in True Blood that just blew the doors open for me and became that project that really made everything that I wanted to do in career and life, or a lot of the things that I wanted to do, possible. So,
and since then, I think too, the Magic Mike movies just amplified your career in a positive way for you.
Absolutely. I got good advice early on, which was if you have a chance to work with the A-list directors, you always go for that. And I was very fortunate, especially out of the gates, to work with Sam Raimi and great actors. It was a great group of young actors that I was put into in terms of Spider-Man. James Franco had just won a Golden Globe for James Dean. Tobey Maguire had been a star of these very well-regarded independent films. Kirsten Dunst, of course. This was great company. And then, of course, True Blood was Alan Ball, fresh off of an Oscar for American Beauty, Anna Paquin. And then, of course, Steven Soderbergh contacted me about Magic Mike. And, clearly, no matter what the subject material was, if it was Steven Soderbergh, I was going to do it. And I'm glad that I did.
I imagine you're in a position now where you can pick and choose quite a bit. I really loved the fact that you elected to be in Pee-wee's Netflix release, Pee-wee's Big Holiday. Did Paul Reubens write that for you?
He did. Yeah, he did, which is mind-blowing for me. Yeah, I was at a period where I was very choosy at that time, coming off of Magic Mike Part 2. And then, of course, those years on True Blood, I realized that I put myself in a position where it would be very easy for someone to marginalize me or what I do as an actor in lieu of some of the other things that were being presented in True Blood and in Magic Mike. And there was a bit of a fight that had to happen because I was getting offered a lot of the same type of role. And I said no to almost everything out of the first year and a half to 2 years after Magic Mike. But of course, Paul Reubens called me and said that he wrote me a part in which I was going to play myself as Pee-wee Herman's best friend in the Pee-wee Herman comeback movie. And I lovingly referred to it as my crybaby. You know, if you remember, Johnny Depp was coming off of being a teen heartthrob in 21 Jump Street and said no to everything, but chose John Waters, working with John Waters on Crybaby. I told Paul, I said, this is my Crybaby. And much to my, like, Paul, actually, we were talking a couple weeks ago, and he said that John Waters saw the movie and relayed to me all of these gushing kind words that John Waters said about me. So that was, for me, that was the highest of praise.
Your esteem went up in my book so much being in that movie, because it was not just, it was playing against type, you know, and I imagine that you've been offered a lot of the, you know, He-Man beefcake roles since, right, dealing with that, but to play not just Pee-wee's best friend, but his soulmate, you know, was beautiful. It was just so beautiful and touching and lovely.
Thanks. You know, there was a bit of a code to be figured out in terms of that, because, like, for example, you know, Pee-wee is never referred to as an adult. You know, when he falls in the well, the ticker tape across the bottom of the news report says boy trapped in well.
Right.
So when you look at it that way through that lens, and I think if we are soulmates or we are simpatico or finish each other's sentences, then there has to be a part of me that is awoken underneath this facade.
Yeah.
But also in terms of, you know, riding up on the motorcycle, you know, Marlon Brando style, it has to be a 10-year-old's version of the motorcycle guy. When I put on the tuxedo and zip line down to save Pee-wee, it has to be a 10-year-old's version of Pee-wee Herman. And our friendship could not have one drop of irony. There could not be not one wink at the camera. Right. It had to be taken absolutely seriously as how a 10-year-old would behave if his best friend didn't show up to his birthday party, you know, and that was that was the equation that I kind of worked out and worked off of.
No, it was really beautiful. And I think that for someone like me who, when I was the 10-year-old on the playground who kept getting beat up by the big guys. And so to see a big guy have that sweetness and that sparkle, I think is, and I think if you think of the really great kind of masculine screen idols, you know, Clark Gable is an example. There's always that sparkle. There's that charm. Like I could kill you, but I won't because I'm so nice.
Well, maybe that character's closer to me than any of the other ones I've played. Because I used to go and beat up the bullies who were beating up my friends who were like the artists and the intellectuals. So
oh, thank you. On behalf of all those skinny kids, thank you so much.
Sure.
If we could talk for a moment about the scene in Magic Mike, the convenience store routine. Was that written for you, or did the guys fight over who was going to do that?
No, that was written for me. Yeah, everything I did in the movie, they wrote all of that for me. Now, well, originally it was written as, you know, there's of course the setup and, you know, there's this awakening of my character's inner dancer, if you will. I think, you know, part of his character arc is, he's always relied on props and doesn't have his own creativity, and isn't really a dancer. And so with the help of some MDMA and the urging of my friends, this scene was then kind of served as the cornerstone or the keystone of the awakening of my character's inner dancer. And so, but it was kind of written, there was the setup, the scenes, previously that set that up, but then it was just written as, does this convenience store routine. So I met with the choreography team, and we started going over what we were going to do. Okay, so we might have a cooler with water bottles, or we might have, chips and or Cheetos, and and then this question came of well, what do we do? What should we do music wise, or what should we ask them to go get us rights wise? And I said, there's no question in my mind. There's one song that every guy sings along to in his car, but would be completely embarrassed to admit it. And that's that principle is the exact principle that we're talking about here. And it has to be I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys. It has to. And so we all just fell on the ground and started laughing, because I thought, well, what if in order to unlock his inner dancer, it's revealed that he's this closet Backstreet Boy fan? So there's a scene earlier where I worked it in, or got them to work in, correcting someone who thought that, someone from NSYNC was in the Backstreet Boys, and I start correcting them to kind of set up this idea that my character, this big jock guy, was at home probably practicing the choreography from the music video that comes out. It is layered in with the story that we're telling physically. But what I really love about that scene is the fact that it's its own little miniature movie. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, there are stakes. There are tactics that aren't working, and switching up of tactics as it escalates. And I love I think that every action scene or fight scene or dance scene is a way to tell a story within this greater story. And so I really love those physical scenes, and with this opportunity to mask. He comes out, he's a bad dancer, but then by the end he gets better, and there's an arc there, and I really love those types of challenges.
Well, it was such a great scene. You pulled it off. The music choice is just right. And, I was reminded, of course, some of the, showcase classic star making dance scenes like that of, Tom Cruise in Risky Business, or Travolta in Saturday Night Fever. And I think that stands on a level. I mean, it really is priceless. And
good. Thank you. Well, thank you.
Yeah, really good. Your experience on Magic Mike informed your decision to make your documentary, Le Bear. Can you talk about that with us for a little bit?
Sure. I initially had heard some stories during my research phase for Magic Mike. It turns out that one of my best friends was a male stripper during the 90s at this very infamous club in Dallas, Texas, the oldest male strip club in the United States, called Le Bear. And I heard this story about, at the time, a 55-year-old aging cowboy who had been stripping consecutively since 1979 at the club. And I heard a rumor that he was still there and still dancing and was still a huge draw. And that he also lived with his mother, who was his biggest cheerleader, his nutritionist, and ran their strippergram company 10 to 6 every day, and just could not have been prouder of her son and the man that he turned out to be. And I thought, this has to be a reality show or something. So I went down with a crew of my buddies that I used to make high school films with, my brother, and then this AFI award-winning director of photography that my brother and I went to high school with. We flew down to Dallas, and we filmed some footage for what I thought would be like a sizzle reel for a reality show. And I showed the footage after that trip to 2 people. I showed it to Elvis Mitchell, and I showed it to Soderbergh, and both of them said, do not sell this to anybody. Don't even show it to them. Go back and finish it as a feature. You're sitting on top of a gold mine. Keep this to yourself. I said, okay. And so I wound up self-financing this documentary that I could not have been prouder of. And it's, also I'm very proud of the soundtrack. I had always been a fan. I came up during like the mid 90s DJ culture. And so we had mixtapes that were 90-minute mixes, both sides of the tape. And I remember wondering back in those days, like, I wonder if you could make a movie that was expertly mixed in and out of tracks the way that a 90-minute mixtape would. And so I contacted my friend Z-Trip. It's a great DJ. And we set, we got over 40 different songs by artists as diverse as, the late Chester Bennington of Linkin Park and the Flaming Lips, RJD2. We went through this huge, and I found a bunch of online record labels that had artists that were looking to get their music out that was for a more affordable rate. And so I would buy those songs and hand them to my DJ, who would then chop them up and make beats and samples out of them, and then layer them underneath, for example, Chester Bennington's lyrics, and create a new song. So it's this completely original flowing soundtrack that I also didn't want to play the music that the guys would be dancing to in the club. I wanted to create moods and atmospheres with the music to the characters that were developed through my interview process. So for example, like, I licensed the Gregorian chant at one point for one of the strippers, which that's never going to be played at that club. But as soon as it starts playing, you start laughing and clapping because it fits his personality and the story that he's telling about being homeschooled and super religious perfectly. So it was a real, looking at the juxtaposition of images on the screen, the story that you're hearing, and then matching that to a musical mood, no matter what the musical style was. And that was, like, for me, that was so freeing. And especially the process of creating a documentary it's like forming a cloud and then reaching your hand into the cloud and pulling things out and freezing them and making them solid and making an ice sculpture out of this gas that you're pulling out of a cloud. And I just love that type of storytelling. Well,
it's beautiful. Has this whetted your appetite to do more directing and filmmaking?
Absolutely. Yes. My father was always surprised that I went down the road of acting first, because he always saw me as a director. I was always directing whatever I was doing as a kid. I was directing my friends. I was directing other people. So it's definitely, in my nature. I also love the editing process. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about how integral TM was to my editing process. I would, as any filmmaker knows, you run up against the wall sometimes when you're editing. Things just aren't working. This segment doesn't work, and what I would find is, like, I would find myself editing. I would have my laptop open and be editing on long plane flights back and forth across the country, and it's time for my afternoon meditation. Great. So I'd take 20 minutes on the plane, meditate. And usually when I would come out of it, I would have some idea about the section that I was stuck on editing. And I'd realize, I bet you if I put this piece of music and I bump this piece of footage here and move this one around, this jigsaw puzzle, I would see the rearranging of it after clearing my head and coming out of meditation. So I find meditation to be a really, like, interesting creative tool, in that I will see visions or have ideas when my body calms or my mind calms about where to go next.
Joe, I'm married to a documentary film editor and also an avid meditator, so I'm very familiar with this phenomenon She'll jump out of her meditation at the end, or sometimes out of the shower, or her dreams
Yeah.
in the morning. Do you find yourself editing in your dreams?
Yes. Oh gosh. Oh, like, I mean, I guess it's the allure of puzzles and why people love puzzles so much.
Yep.
Just the obsession of it, the full total immersion of it. And it's a beautiful thing, and it's a horrible thing when you're in the middle of editing,
Oh
and
yeah.
you are you are sleeping with that thing under your pillow,
Yep.
for sure.
Yep. My wife refers to editing as putting together a jigsaw puzzle where you also have to make all the pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you make the pieces and then have to keep figuring out where they go. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
you should see her pack a suitcase.
absolutely.
It's
Good or
brilliant.
bad?
It is brilliant. Yeah.
I'm wondering if were there documentaries or documentarians who informed or inspired you during the
Sure. I mean, Errol Morris, who was inspired by Herzog. I mean, the two of them, of course. Of course, Ken Burns, I think, is a genius. But then again, so those are more of like your very highbrow. But then, you look at something like The King of Kong, which took like the most outrageous characters you could ever possibly imagine and turned this nerdy story about 1980s arcade video games into Rocky. And I remember going to the theaters. I went to art house theaters 3 times to see King of Kong while it was in theaters. I just could not believe how effective and how like emotionally up, and people were cheering and screaming at all the same points in every single screening and that I saw. To realize that you could create that kind of effect, to me was I'm a big I was a big fan of that, which doesn't necessarily get included with like Man on Wire and kind of the Oscar nominated documentaries.
There was a moment in King of Kong actually that reminded me of a moment Le Bear, and that is the moment in the home party where the girl falls on the floor, and it was so unexpected, but it was so priceless. And it was one of those things you must be thinking when you're making the film, oh my God, I can't believe we just caught that. There's a moment in King of Kong, maybe you remember, where Steve Wiebe is doing it, and in the background you hear the little boy, "Daddy, wipe me." and it's like priceless. You can't manufacture that. It felt like that, unexpected, but wonderful little moment.
Yeah, there's a bit of providence, I think, that appears when you get lucky in a documentary, or any type of filming, I should say, but a documentary especially, because you're just trying to capture life. And when those moments happen, you cannot believe it. Oh my gosh, we had the camera running. And there were several moments like that in Le Bear. The entire amateur night, the way that played out, we could have gone to. So amateur, for people that don't know, Le Bear's about this male strip club, and you have to get hired through the Thursday night amateur night. Everyone has to come out and try to dance, who is not a professional. And you see the difference between the professionals and people just getting up there for the first time and can't get their pants over their socks and blah, 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 blah. But there are several moments in that we could have filmed for 10 years, 20 years, and not have gotten the footage that we got on the one amateur night that we were at. Like we're good. Like we got it. And it was, once again, it was this complete story in and of itself. So I love those moments of providence that you get where you're just like, oh my gosh, like, please tell me we had the camera rolling and we got that. Oh my God, this is amazing.
Well, it's such a great world to take a peek at and to get to see these characters. And, the whole idea of male entertaining, it struck me, it's not something that comes naturally to guys to dress up in a fireman's outfit and gyrate. But, you got women and you got money, and, you overcome whatever insecurities. And it reminded me actually of the nature films narrated by David Attenborough, where they show the birds promenading for each. And it's the male bird with a plumage who's dancing to get the girl.
Absolutely. Yeah. Male. Yes. The David Attenborough birds That's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah, it's amazing. And the men have to work so hard to create this story. But in and of that, it was this, you know, I like taking something that isn't considered highbrow and then elevating it and showing the humanity of it. I'm interested in that. I'm fascinated by that. And I think what happened was a conversation about the differences between men and women, neurologically,
Yes.
psychologically, what turns them on. And so there's this kind of greater conversation happening that you don't think you're going to be lured into because you're watching, oh, I'm watching this, you know, male stripper documentary. But I tried to present it in a way that, in a fun way, that on the car ride home, or, you know, when the TV shuts off, you're going to have this conversation about the differences between men and women as they relate to their own sexuality, interests, and basically the way that the efforts that men have to go to turn the women on, where all the women have to do is look good.
Well, it was really an interesting look at that world. We're okay if we shift gears to talk about some of your film favorites.
Please, yes.
What comes to mind? Favorite scenes, why they're your favorites, what makes them memorable to you?
Well, growing up part Sicilian, I'll say that growing up part Sicilian, late 70s, 80s, there was great pride in the great Italian filmmakers of that era and Italian actors. I mean, what a time for me to be coming up and wanting to be an actor, where I had films like Godfather 1 and 2 by Francis Ford Coppola, and, you know, Goodfellas, Martin Scorsese, and you know, hold on, my dog wants to go down. So this is part of the fun of interviewing at your house in quarantine.
Hi.
Who we got there?
There's
What's that critter's name?
That's Bubbles. We adopted Bubbles a year ago, and it's just been it was the dog that my wife wanted that just loved me. Nobody's had a better quarantine than Bubbles, that's for sure. I've been home all day with her. She sits on my lap probably 20 hours out of the day. But you know, what a time for my formative years were growing up with you know, these you know, the golden era of Italian American cinema. You know, I saw everything that Robert De Niro was in. I saw everything that Martin Scorsese directed. You know, of course, the Godfathers, I watched them ad nauseum, the first two. You know, that's kind of the RSTLNE. If you're, you know, a fan of Wheel of Fortune, they give you those letters and then you have to pick letters other than those. So as far as my favorite films go past that, you know, the greatest writer, to me, the greatest screenwriter of my lifetime was and will be John Milius. I love John Milius. I am, and I've gotten to actually know John Milius. So, you know, movies like those late 70s adventure films, I was a huge fan of, you know. I love Conan the Barbarian. That's one of those films that ranks high. I don't know if you want me to stop after the pit stop.
Can you recite the line if I give you the cue? What is the best in life?
Well, I think I could get in trouble for saying this now, but yeah, of course. To crush your enemies.
The greatest pleasure is to vanquish your enemies, to rob them of their wealth and chase.
Hear the lamentations of the women. Yes, to crush your enemies, to kneel before you. Hear the lamentations of the women.
Now, Oliver Stone wrote originally, and then Milius took it over. Do you know any of the?
Yeah,
backstory?
Oliver wrote an original script that was it was way out there. He wrote a very, very much out there script, and what was filmed was actually Milius. If you have a chance, there's like audio commentary of John Milius and Arnold talking about Conan the Barbarian, which if you've never heard it, it's amazing as they just walk you through the film. And Yeah, Oliver had a writing credit, but it was really, that was John's script that they filmed. You know, John rewrote the entire thing. I think he brought it down, made it more human, made it smaller, and more indicative of, I think, you know, what Robert E. Howard had initially intended. And so yeah, I'm a great. But that falls into the category. I love those late '70s movies. You know, another you know, film that I love that came around out of that time was First Blood, for example. First Blood was a Vietnam veteran retelling of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Mm.
And I just thought, what a brilliant take on that story, and timely. But you know, I love those '70s films that allowed the characters to breathe. You know, and there was silence, and there was you know, almost like there were soliloquies. There were these moments where you really got to feel the character, and they didn't mind their pacing. You know, another film I love recently is that film Mandy, that Panos Cosmatos made a few years back, because it felt like a film of that era, but having the knowledge that we have now and infusing it with that.
What was it about? Mandy was an unusual film, and it's just Nicolas Cage plays a man whose wife is abducted, and there's a cult scenario behind it. Very unusual movie. What was it about that struck a chord with you?
You know, simple in its storytelling, but just the amount of creativity, I think, that went into, and planning that went into every single frame. You know, you could look at that script, and I have looked at that script, and you know, hillbillies break into a cabin, and a fight ensues, and they abduct Nicolas Cage's wife. You know, okay, so the scene is simple, but what comes out is, you know, the scene is lit by electricity. There's an electrical surge going through the house, so it's just a screen of flat black, you know, with the orchestral score by Johann Johansson, you know, rest in peace. You know, this incredible moody score, and then boom, a flash of blue electricity, and you see these almost like monsters wrapped in black leather, and then boom, the screen goes dark again, and then boom, electricity. So you're having this strobe effect as this break-in happens. It was so visually spectacular. And then you cut to this scene right afterwards, which is kind of like a Jim Jarmusch trick, where you just set the camera up to capture life. And it's just this camera set up on a bathroom with a toilet and a shelf and the worst wallpaper you could ever possibly imagine. And in stumbles Nicolas Cage, drunk in a pair of dirty, tighty, whitey underpants. And it's just, the camera sits as he drinks vodka and screams for a good solid 4 to 5 minutes. Like, it's just, you know, it was just this this juxtaposition of styles and creativity, I think, that was you know, so striking and stood out to me. And I also, you know, I love David Lynch films, and I love films that don't feel a need to explain themselves. You know, that the meaning is derived by the viewer, and they shouldn't be spoon fed. And I enjoy films like that are confusing. You know, I wrote a term paper comparing Vertigo to Lost Highway back in a film philosophy class, and it was, I'm not sure if I really got to the answer by the end. And I don't know if there was an answer. I don't know if David has an answer. And you know, if he doesn't, it's probably, it makes me even happier.
I know he doesn't like to talk about his films. He treats them as abstract paintings, and he doesn't want to infuse meaning. He wants the audience to give its own meaning to the piece. Mandy reminded me of another, I don't know if you saw this Nicolas Cage movie recently, Color Out of Space. Did you see that?
Yeah. So I shot the film Spectravision that produced both of those. I produced, in conjunction with them, a new film that I have coming out, set to come out in January, called Arch Enemy. So yes, I get advanced screenings of all of it.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that was based on the Lovecraft.
Yes.
And Richard Stanley, who I actually, when he was in LA doing press for Color Out of Space, he and I became fast friends. And so I got to spend a lot of time with Richard Stanley, who is one of the most fascinating people you could ever spend time with on the planet.
Well, you've gotten to meet some cool people. Richard Stanley, John Milius, that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And Panos Cosmatos. Yeah, actually, we were all in one room, actually, at one point.
You know, Panos' father directed one of my favorite films, Tombstone, with Kurt Russell.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that movie. That's on my list, too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So good. So good. Val Kilmer was knockout in that.
Amazing. And I love Kurt Russell. I think people don't appreciate Kurt Russell enough.
I think you're exactly right. So versatile.
Oh,
he could do comedy. He could do action. He could do
everything, and he could blend them. He was fantastic. That's people usually ask actors when they're younger, who do you want your career to look like? And there were really two people that I mentioned, but one of them was Kurt Russell.
When I was a kid growing up in LA, I did TV work because my dad was in the business, and I'd go on auditions, and Kurt was my competition.
No way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
He pursued a career. I became a meditation teacher. I don't know. I'm happy with my choice. But yeah, I'd see he was 12 years old. I was 12 years old. We go on calls. We go on a call for Combat or Ben Casey or whatever, you know. But yeah, I remember him from those days. Joe, can you talk about another film, another favorite?
Sure. Well, you know, I think speaking of like, you know, the John Milius writing tree, you know, Quentin Tarantino has publicly spoken many times about him being the, you know, the second greatest writer of all time to John Milius, or that his success would not be possible without John Milius. And, you know, maybe that's him being humble, but also incredibly reverential. And, you know, also coming up in the early to mid 90s, you know, aspiring to work in entertainment and film. That period was dominated by Quentin Tarantino, whether it was, you know, Reservoir Dogs, which is a play. He wrote a play and filmed the play, which was just all about characters. And you talk about feeling like a 70s heist movie. That movie was such a throwback and really a brilliant piece of writing. And then, of course, he wrote True Romance, which was the next piece of work that I saw by him, which wound up being directed by Tony Scott. Which I thought, I'm glad Tony directed it. I'm glad that he changed the ending from the original script. And my God,
the scene in that film between Dennis Hopper and Christopher Walken. I watched that scene, and I think at the end, when the director said cut, the whole crew must have just gone, whoa. Yeah. I mean, the game that's going on in that scene, and the stakes and the minutia and the details, and, you know, you talk about, you know, changing your method of trying to overcome obstacles as an actor, and the back and forth is brilliant, and the writing is just, it's a, you know, I mean, that's one of the great scenes of all time. Yes.
You know, and the cast that was put together, top to bottom, was incredible. And then, of course, you know, Pulp Fiction came out my senior year of high school, and my mind was just blown apart when I saw it. I sat in my seat afterwards in the theater and just couldn't believe what I just saw. And I saw that movie 8 times in the movie theater. And we used to have a theater in Pittsburgh, one of the college theaters called the Beehive, where you could go. They had couches, and if you got there early enough, you could get the couches. You could bring your own beer or alcohol, and you could smoke cigarettes in the theater. So we would smoke and drink, and I watched a double feature of Reservoir Dogs followed by Pulp Fiction. And, you know, it's just those beautiful experiences of going to the movies and seeing. And that was the same theater I saw Lost Highway in. I saw Seven there. I saw Kids there. I saw Swingers there. I saw all those great independent films that were really formative of me in the mid 90s. I saw all of those at this art house theater, you know, smoking and drinking on the couch back in the day.
You mentioning John Milius, and he did a lot of work behind the scenes, of course, screenwriting. He wrote the line, "Go ahead, make my day." for the Dirty Harry films. He
Oh, yeah.
wrote the USS Indianapolis scene for Jaws that Robert Shaw
Yeah.
delivers as Quint. He co-wrote Apocalypse Now. I mean, he's kind of the one of the unsung heroes, at least to movie fans, probably.
Yeah,
And-
he's another one who, for whatever reason, you know, I think maybe it was his persona. You know, he was always an outsider and a rebel.
Yeah.
He was the kind of filmmaker that would invite people in to take a meeting with him and then pull a gun out of a drawer and put it on the desk in front of them. You know, he was this, you know, really, he was like the Hemingway of film, really. And I just, maybe it's the nature of the way the entertainment industry is, and the fact that those types of mavericks, or those, you know, people with that type of rough and tumble sensibility are the outsiders. But those were always the people that I, you know, especially as an adult and a fully formed, you know, whatever, an artist who's been doing this for a little while, I identify with them or aspire to be.
Yeah.
I love the fact that Spielberg is on record as saying that USS Indianapolis scene is the best scene in Jaws. And, you know, the fact that there's no shark, there's no action, it's completely quiet, it's all talk, and it is smack dab in the exact center of the film. And it just makes the film, it takes your breath away.
And it's a monologue, and you don't get to see monologues really on film. Theater, yes, because I think, you know, books are about what characters are thinking, plays are about what characters are saying, and films are about what characters are doing. It's rare and it's difficult to have the type of writing that warrants a character sitting there and everyone getting quiet and listening to this person talk. And it really takes a master like a John Milius to put something like that together. But yeah, that scene was brilliant. I mean, just amazing. Yeah, standout. All of John's work was standout.
The wide release of Shawshank Redemption, same day as Pulp Fiction came out in 1994.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Well, it's interesting, you know, those films that came out at the same time that maybe, you know, I mean, Shawshank was nominated for Best Picture, as was Pulp Fiction. So it's not like Shawshank didn't get attention or Pulp didn't get attention, or they kind of knocked each other up. But you know, it's like you think about like Sorcerer came out 2 weeks after Star Wars hit in 1977, and you just think there's, you know, you're going to get lost in that wake. But it's interesting to think about the year 1994 and how many amazing movies came out that year. I mean, Forrest Gump won Best Picture and won Best Actor, but you had the crew from Pulp. You know, Pulp had won Cannes, and they were all touring, and of course Shawshank and Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins, who were amazing. And that was a great, I remember that year for film. That was a great year at the Oscars.
Joe, you mentioned earlier that King of Kong was one of your favorite influences, and we want to invite a guest on to say hello, to have you meet and to meet you. Dean, you want to bring him on? We want to introduce Walter Day, founder of Twin Galaxies Video and star of The King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters. Walter, and meet Joe Manganiello. Joe, meet Walter.
Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Walter, I can't believe this. This is incredible. I'm a big fan. I saw King of Kong 3 times in the movie while I was in the movie theaters. I kept bringing friends. I'm like, you have to see this. And you are amazing. I mean, I know it's you, but like, you just can't help but love you as a character, as a person in that film. So it's great to meet you.
Well, that's good to hear. Thank you, Joe. It's very interesting that a couple noted film critics recently did a review of the 3,000 films of the last decade, and they wanted to whittle it down, the 3,000, to the top 30 films of the last decade, and King of Kong was their 29th choice.
Wow.
That was a lot of movies that King of Kong was more significant to them.
Walter,
That's
for
amazing.
the non-gaming civilians in the universe, can you explain a little bit about what you do in life and what you do in the film?
Actually, my tenure in the field is that I was the scorekeeper. I was the original referee and rule maker, and the person who was the organizer of organized video game playing way back at the very beginning. So often people refer to me as the father of esports for the whole world because I started it all when no one else has started it all. So I keep track of the scores, make the rules, enforce the rules, crown the champions, have events, have contests, and have ceremonies, especially ceremonies. I'd have ceremonies where I'd crown and honor the people who were the top players of the world.
Joe, I know from watching seeing the Colbert interview where you talked about your Dungeons and Dragons fervor. Are you a video gamer also?
I am. Yes, I was part of that generation. I grew up with video games and grew up with my Atari 2600, of course. And I was part of the generation that went to arcades when they first started happening. So, you know, putting your quarter up on top, I've got next game, you know, and everything from the wide range of, I remember, gosh, I was involved in a very serious contest at a bar one night in college. There was a guy who was a woodworker, and he made this incredible cedar bar, like a bar, you know, for your living room with stools and everything. He carved them all, and he was moving and couldn't take it with him. And so he had a contest at this bar. He said there was a Miss Pac-Man, a sit-down Miss Pac-Man machine. And he said, whoever wins the Miss Pac-Man tournament has the highest score of tonight. You will win this bar, the cedar bar, and you can take it home to your apartment. I'll help you move it. And I wound up winning. So I won the Miss Pac-Man competition. Now, I'm no Bill Mitchell, I'll say that. But I won the bar playing Miss Pac-Man that night. So
That's awesome.
there you
That's
go.
amazing.
I don't think there's a, hold on a second. My dog wants to jump in my lap. Here, Walter, this is my dog, if you will. Maybe you want to write a song about my dog.
Bubbles.
I don't know.
Bubbles.
My dog Bubbles.
Tiny
I don't know.
bubbles.
There's a video game called Bubbles.
Oh yeah.
That's right. Bubble.
So there's no, you know, you won't find me listed on the Twin Galaxies website, but I had that bar during college because I won that Miss Pac-Man competition. So.
Do you have any questions for Walter, Joe, before we break?
Well, I've been following a little bit. I know that lately there's been a lot of kind of the Donkey Kong competition has heated up again. There are new competitors in Donkey Kong that are vying for the all-time record. I was going to ask him a little bit about that and what's happening there.
Well, it's amazing how long Donkey Kong drags on, how much it's loved, and how many people are really, really amazed by it. And it's always amazing by how many people who know Billy Mitchell because he's the world's most famous video game player. You know, he's the.
I went to Ricky's Hot Wings in Hollywood, Florida, to try to find him, and he wasn't there, but they put me on the phone with him.
Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool. I don't know if he would have known that you were a movie star or actor. He
knew his daughter loved True Blood, so he actually put me on the phone with his daughter who wanted to talk to me. So yeah, we had a fun conversation.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Walter's authored a series of video gaming cards, and he was very kind to offer to create for you and to send to you. We'll show it now. The Joe Manganiello Superstars of 2020 gaming card, your own gaming card. Yeah.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
What an honor. This is incredible. I follow Twin Galaxies on Twitter and try to keep up with what's going on. This is a great honor. Walter, thank you. I hope that I will do it justice.
I believe the card is in the mail.
No, this card is real. This card is at the printer right now, being printed tonight, and it will be in the mail. It's being sent to you probably within a few days.
I cannot. I am looking at my shelf right now, and I'm thinking where it's going to. I can see where it's going to go. This is amazing. Thank you, Walter. Thank you.
Anyway,
thank you.
just wanted to extend a little thank you to you, Joe, for being on the show, and thought that would give you a tickle and our appreciation for taking the time to join us.
Thanks so much for having me. This was great. I love talking film with you guys, and Chris, thank you very much for being there on that day and offering for my wife and I to come learn TM at the Academy in Beverly Hills. Thank you so much.
It was a real pleasure. Joe Manganiello, thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And we'll be on the lookout for the Deathstroke movie.
Thanks. And please tell Charles Bush that I say hello, because I was in.
Hello from Kanaka.
I played Kanaka. Well, I played Kanaka in Psycho Beach Party. That was one of my first plays in college that I did. I was the big surf god Kanaka. So please tell him that I am a huge fan of his.
I'll make the introduction.
Please, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Good. Joe, thanks for being on the show. Thanks so much. Real treat.
Thanks for having me, guys. Walter, I'm a big fan.
Oh.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for joining us on the Filmosophers Movie Talk Show. Please subscribe to stay up to date on our newest episodes.